I was never supposed to be the kind of man who made people nervous when he walked into a room. My father was a dock worker from Cork. My mother cleaned houses in Boston for families who pretended not to see her. When I came to America at 19, I didn't have pedigree, connections, or polish. I had a pair of steel-toed boots, a second-hand toolbox, and the kind of hunger that doesn't go away once you've been poor long enough to understand what it really means. For 35 years, I worked construction, saved every dollar, learned where money hides, and bought property while others were buying cars. One duplex became 4. 4 became 16. By the time my daughter Fiona graduated college, O'Rourke Holdings owned 30 downtown office buildings from Boston to Providence. I'd never bragged about it. I still drove a Ford, wore flannel, and kept my accent even when it cost me business. Success meant providing quietly, not showing off. When Fiona brought home her fiancé, I tried to like him. Evan Cole was a wealth manager. Tailored suits, perfect smile, handshake that felt like it came from a man who'd never had dirt under his nails. He called me Sir the first night we met. But it wasn't respect. It was distance. That subtle emphasis people use when they think they're talking down politely. "So, Mr. O'Rourke," he said over dinner, swirling his wine, "Fiona tells me you ran a construction company?" "Still do," I told him. "Built most of what you see between Back Bay and Quincy Market." He nodded like a man humoring a waiter. "That's admirable. There's real value in tradespeople these days. You all keep the economy running." I noticed the way he said "you all." Fiona smiled nervously, changed the subject, and I let it go. One comment doesn't define a man, but small cracks become fault lines if you pretend not to see them. Over the next year, he never stopped with the small cuts. At brunch with Fiona's friends, he'd joke about my salt-of-the-earth sensibilities. When I mentioned a new development project, he'd pat my shoulder and say, "That's great, Liam. Not everyone needs an MBA to make it." He called himself self-made while standing on privilege thicker than marble floors. Fiona loved him. That was the hardest part. She saw the polished surface, the ambition, the charisma. I saw calculation, the way he'd glance around rooms, cataloging who mattered and who didn't. To Evan, worth wasn't measured in integrity, it was measured in who could be useful. 6 months before the wedding, I invited him to lunch at a pub I'd been going to since the 80s. He looked around like he'd been sentenced to community service. "You really eat here?" he asked, unfolding his napkin as if the table might stain him. "They serve the best stew in Boston." He forced a smile. "I guess I'm just more of a sushi and client dinner kind of guy." "I figured," I said. "Listen, Evan, I wanted to talk about Fiona's future. She's got talent. That interior design business she's starting could go far." He laughed. "Sure, but realistically, she doesn't have much business background. I'll take care of her investments. You just relax and enjoy retirement." Retirement. He said it like a benediction for the obsolete. When I got home, I sat in my study, surrounded by blueprints and deeds, and realized he had no idea who he was talking to. I'd spent a lifetime being underestimated. It used to bother me. Then I learned how powerful invisibility can be. Let people misjudge you long enough, and they show you who they really are. The wedding was set for early summer at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. Grand ballroom, white roses, a string quartet. the kind of event designed to impress people who needed reminding of their own importance. I told Fiona I'd cover the costs. She hugged me, said I was too generous, and I told her that's what fathers are for. She didn't know that the hotel's ownership papers sat in my office safe under my company's name. When the rehearsal dinner came, Evan's tone shifted from smug to performative. He made a toast about bridging worlds. Fiona's family represents everything hard-working about America, he said, glass raised. They remind us that dignity doesn't require luxury. Everyone clapped politely. Fiona blushed, mistaking condescension for charm. I smiled and said nothing. The morning of the wedding, I woke before dawn, put on the same navy suit I'd worn to Fiona's graduation, and looked in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't angry, just patient. I'd learned patience from decades of city inspectors, crooked developers, and partners who thought I couldn't read balance sheets. But patience ends where family begins. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Fiona glowed. The music was perfect. For a while, I forgot everything. Then came the reception. I was standing by the bar, talking with an old friend from the Carpenters Union, when I heard Evan's voice carry across the ballroom microphone. "Before we dance," he said, smiling at the crowd, "I want to take a moment to thank the people who made tonight possible. Fiona, for being the light of my life, my parents, for their endless support, and to my new father-in-law, Liam O'Rourke. Thank you for teaching me that humility can be beautiful." The room chuckled, soft laughter like polite applause. "He's a man of the people," Evan continued, gesturing toward me, "the kind of guy who knows the value of an honest day's work. Some men build companies, others just build." The laughter was sharper this time. I saw Fiona's expression falter. She mouthed Evan, but he was too drunk on attention to notice. "He reminds me that every castle needs a foundation," Evan added, smirking. "So here's to the help. Without them, none of this would stand." A few guests laughed outright. Others looked down at their plates. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but didn't move. 30 years on job sites teaches you when to swing a hammer and when to wait. Fiona looked mortified. Her maid of honor reached for her hand. The string quartet stopped playing. Evan basked in the awkward silence like it was spotlight. I finished my drink, set it down, and walked to the podium. "Mind if I say a few words?" I asked. Evan looked startled, then grinned. "Of course, Liam. The floor's all yours." He stepped aside, clearly expecting some sentimental thank you that would restore his image. I adjusted the microphone. "You're right, Evan," I said quietly. "Foundations matter. You can build a tall building on sand, but eventually it collapses under its own arrogance." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Evan smiled too widely, not realizing he'd already lost control of the room. "I spent 35 years working with my hands," I continued. "Those same hands signed the deeds for the buildings that house most of your firms, including yours, Evan." The room went still. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded lease agreement. Cole and Everett Financial leases floors 18 through 23 at 200 Clarendon Street. Annual rent, $2.8 million. Landlord, O'Rourke Holdings, LLC. Patricia Klein, his managing director, stood up from her table. Wait, she said slowly. You're O'Rourke Holdings? I nodded. Been that way since 1991. She stared at Evan. We've been trying to meet Mr. O'Rourke for months about our expansion. You never mentioned he was your father-in-law. Evan's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a man who'd been punched underwater. I didn't realize. That's the problem, I said. You never realized. You looked at me and saw a man beneath you. You never thought to ask who poured the concrete beneath your career. The guests were whispering now, phones out, recording. Fiona had tears in her eyes, not embarrassment anymore, but something closer to clarity. I turned back to the crowd. My wife Maeve used to say respect is the cheapest currency, costs nothing to give but reveals everything when withheld. I stayed quiet because Fiona loved this man. But love doesn't blind fathers forever. Evan tried to laugh. You're making a scene, Liam. No, son. You made the scene. I'm just providing the lighting. I opened the folder again, pulled out another document. Effective Monday morning, your firm's lease is terminated for breach of professional conduct. You have 90 days to vacate my property. Gasps filled the ballroom. Patricia Klein covered her mouth. Evan's color drained. You can't do that, he stammered. I can, I said. Clause 14. Tenant conduct damaging to landlord's business interest. You represented me tonight publicly as the help. Consider this your notice. Someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. Fiona was crying openly now, standing beside me. Evan turned to her. You're not going to let him ruin me. She shook her head slowly. You did that yourself. The applause faded, replaced by the sound of Evan's glass hitting the floor, shattering. The music didn't resume. People began whispering, taking photos. I left the podium, walked back to my table, and poured myself another drink. By the time the cake was cut, Evan had vanished from the ballroom. Fiona spent the rest of the evening sitting beside me, quiet, shell-shocked, but strangely calm. She didn't need to say thank you. Fathers don't do it for gratitude. They do it to draw the line that protects what's left of their children's dignity. That was Saturday night. By Monday morning, I was already in my office downtown when Patricia Klein called. Her voice was professional, but tight. Mr. O'Rourke, I wanted to apologize for what happened. We're terminating Evan Cole's employment immediately. The board saw the footage. What footage? I asked. It's all over social media. Half the guests posted it. Your speech, the lease, everything. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline I'd built one beam at a time. I didn't want a scene, I said. Sometimes scenes teach lessons faster than silence, she replied. Evan's world collapsed in 72 hours. His firm replaced him before noon. His licenses were suspended pending review for ethical violations. The press had a field day. Banker fired after publicly insulting secret billionaire landlord. But the real story wasn't revenge. It was legacy. When Fiona came by that evening, she sat across from my desk, her wedding ring already off. I kept thinking if I stayed quiet, he'd change, she'd said. I shook my head. People don't change when they're comfortable. They change when they lose something they thought they owned. She nodded slowly, eyes on the city outside. He used to say respect had to be earned. It does, I said, and he spent every day losing it. She smiled faintly for the first time in days. You didn't just end his career, Dad. You ended the version of me that thought I had to apologize for you. That was worth more than every building I'd ever built. Evan didn't reach out that first week, or the week after. I didn't expect him to. Shame makes cowards of loud men. But Boston is a small city when you built most of it. I heard pieces of his downfall before they reached the papers. The condo he'd financed on borrowed commission fell into default. His partners froze him out of every deal. By the time his name hit the Globe's business column, he was already a ghost. The headline read, "Groom's wedding toast goes viral, ends in career meltdown." They summarized my entire life in 4 paragraphs, called me reclusive property investor Liam O'Rourke, quoted my line about respect being cheap. I didn't talk to reporters, didn't issue statements. Silence protects the truth better than speeches. When I walked into my buildings after that, the staff, doormen, cleaners, maintenance techs, nodded differently, not because of money or viral fame, because someone had finally said what they lived every day. That work isn't lesser because it leaves calluses. That dignity isn't something wealth can grant. Fiona stayed with me for a while, sleeping in her old room, taking long walks with our dog through South Boston. We didn't talk about the wedding. We talked about her mother, how Maeve would have handled it. Maeve had always believed in quiet justice. She used to say, "Some men learn through praise, others only through loss." It was late one night when Fiona finally asked, "How did you stay so calm?" When he said what he said, "I've been insulted by better men," I told her, "but I also knew who I was." He didn't. That's the difference. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "He made me feel like loving you was something I had to defend." "You don't have to defend family," I said. "You protect it. And sometimes protection looks like letting truth do what kindness won't." She was quiet for a long time after that. By the end of the month, the video had 500,000 views online. Strangers sent messages thanking me for standing up. People I'd never met saying they'd shown the clip to their sons or daughters. I didn't care about any of that. Virality fades faster than wet cement. But it made Fiona see that the world hadn't left men like me behind. It had just stopped noticing us until we reminded it who laid the groundwork. When I finally saw Evan again, it wasn't planned. It was 2 months later at a coffee shop near the waterfront. He looked thinner, hollowed out, a man rearranged by consequences he still didn't understand. I was waiting for a meeting with a developer about a renovation permit. He walked in, stopped when he saw me, and froze like a man facing the scene of a crime. He started to turn around, but I waved him over. "Sit." He hesitated, then obeyed. His suit didn't fit right anymore. The shine was gone from his cufflinks. "Did you come to apologize?" I asked. "I came to ask why," he said. "You could have pulled me aside. You didn't have to humiliate me in front of everyone." I looked at him for a long moment. "You humiliated yourself." I just held up a mirror. He clenched his jaw. "I lost everything." "No," I said. "You lost what wasn't yours to begin with. Respect, marriage, reputation, those are leased, not owned. You defaulted." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said softly. "Just older. And I learned sooner, what you refuse to. That power isn't loud. It's quiet. It's patient. And it remembers. He stared at the table, eyes glassy. Fiona won't even talk to me. She will one day, I said, but not to make you feel better. To make sure she doesn't forget what blindness costs. He stood to leave, shoulders slumped. You ruined my life. Son, I said, you did that the moment you confused money with worth. He didn't look back. I watched him disappear into the fog outside, a small shape swallowed by a city that never even slowed down. That night, I found Fiona at the dining table, sketching designs for a client. Her eyes were clearer, her smile steadier. I ran into him, I said. She looked up. Did you hit him? No. Pity. She grinned faintly. Hatred's a heavy thing to carry, Fiona. Best to set it down after the lesson's learned. She nodded. Then I'm setting it down. She started a new design firm that fall, one focused on sustainable spaces, the kind of projects Maeve would have loved. She named it Foundation Studio. Said it was her way of turning pain into purpose. When her first office opened, she signed the lease without realizing it was one of mine. I didn't tell her until later. Dad, she said, laughing, you could have told me. I wanted you to know you earned it, I said. Didn't want the name O'Rourke to feel like a safety net. Wanted it to feel like a standard. Every Friday she'd come by my office, drop off new blueprints, and ask about the old days. I told her stories about the first building I ever bought, the one where the roof leaked, and I spent Christmas Eve climbing ladders in the snow. She'd listen like it was scripture. Months passed. Life settled into something quieter. People stopped asking about the wedding, and new scandals took its place online. But once in a while, I'd get a letter or email from someone who'd seen the clip, telling me they'd stood up to their own Evan at work or family dinners. One man wrote, "You reminded me my father was never poor. He was just proud." I printed that one and kept it in my desk. Fiona got remarried a year and a half later. Smaller ceremony. No microphones, no audience pretending to care. Just family and close friends in a garden Maeve once planted. Her new husband, Mark, was a quiet engineer who shook my hand like he meant it. During dinner, he asked me about my first job. Not my net worth, my work. That told me everything. After the ceremony, Fiona caught me standing alone under the lights. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I said. "I finally saw you marry a man who looks you in the eye instead of over your shoulder." She hugged me. "You think Mom would have liked him?" "She would have told him to treat you like a miracle or disappear," I said. We both laughed, and for the first time since Maeve's funeral, it didn't hurt. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I walked through the empty garden. The tables were still set, candles flickering low. I thought about how many years I'd spent trying to blend in, to let the world think I was ordinary. But the truth is, ordinary men built everything that extraordinary ones like Evan took for granted. When people ask me now what I do, I still say construction, not because I'm hiding anything, but because it's true. Only now I build people instead of buildings. I teach young guys how to save, how to buy property, how to make their labor work for them. I tell them about Fiona's first husband, not by name, just as a warning about arrogance and what it costs. Sometimes, when I pass the Fairmont, I see couples taking pictures on the steps, the same marble stairs where I stood that night. I wonder if they ever think about the man who owns the ground beneath them, the one who learned that revenge doesn't have to roar to be complete. It just has to remind the world that respect isn't optional. Every time I drive past that ballroom, I think of my wife's voice. Let silence do your talking until silence would tell a lie. That night, silence would have been a lie, so I spoke, and I haven't needed to raise my voice since.